All right, back tonight here on In Focus. On to this now. As the world continues to observe Mental Health Awareness Month, there are growing calls for workplaces to do more to ensure the wellness of their employees. To discuss this and more, and how companies can create a conducive environment for their employees, I'm joined by Dr. Kitumesi Mashego, a clinical psychologist. Dr. Mashego, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening. Share with us, your experience of how work environments are geared up to responding, for example, to an employee that readily shares their struggle with mental health.
Good evening to the listeners. Sadly, in 2024, we're still dealing with stigma around mental health issues, especially in the workplace, but generally in society, specifically in South Africa. There's still a lot of stigma around what mental health challenges are, accepting that they're a part of life, that they can also, occur in a workspace, and also how employers react to someone who is struggling with mental health challenges. There's still so much that needs to be done. For example, there is not budgeted resources for people who are struggling in the workplace. And sadly, everywhere we go, we take our minds. We cannot leave it at home when we go to work. So we really need to do the work to ensure that people's minds are taken care of so that they can deliver, so that they can be productive, so that they can thrive. We really still need to learn as a society, as people, how to support people with mental health challenges, or just people who are struggling with, mental health issues.
And part of that learning, I suppose, is getting an understanding of the specifics, for example, of what actually is a mental health disorder or a mental health diagnosis when you're talking about anxiety disorders, when you're talking about depression, when you're talking about bipolar disorder. What are you talking about exactly, and how do these play out in the spectrum of mental health?
Mental health issues or challenges range on a continuum, meaning you can have someone who struggles but not as severe, and someone who's really severely struggling or impaired. And really, when we make a diagnosis, it's because it's impacting your functioning, that is your personal relationship, how you interact with people, or even just how you interact with yourself and survive in this life. So we really need to understand that the brain chemistry plays a role in that. Sometimes people need medication, especially when you have clinical diagnoses such as bipolar or your major depression disorder. Sometimes people do need medication because there is something that's happening with the neurotransmitters in the brain, the wiring of the brain. We really need to emphasize that people are predisposed, some of them, to be diagnosed with this. The same way someone is predisposed to cancer, diabetes, cholesterol, is the same way that someone could be predisposed to mental health issues that at times require multidisciplinary interventions that include medication. So sometimes, we need to also understand that what stresses me and causes me depression might not necessarily be the same for you. So we really need to bear in mind that people are not the same. We're all unique.
And do you think a mental health professional like yourself has now become almost an imperative in a workspace where companies is not a nice to have now, it's something that they really need to look at investing in?
Definitely, that needs to be prioritized. And I see nowadays that, there is, big companies that do get your service providers, but even that is not utilized because of the stigma. Even the in-house employee assistance programs are not utilized because of the stigma, because people just do not want to go there. But also just mental health disorders in themselves, sometimes denial is a part of the issue, in that you do get people who've got this challenges, but they in themselves are in denial as part of the process, that must unfold in the challenge that they struggle with. But additionally also that there's so much stigma, and it's not just societal. Sometimes the people themselves stigmatize themselves. So it's almost like a self-stigma that when I have this, I want to snap out of it, because why do I have it and the next person doesn't have it? And people have this notion that with mental health challenges, whether it's your mild presentation or the severe, that people must just snap out of it. So people have this thing that, I must just snap out of this. Why am I struggling with this? Not understanding that, it is something that is happening to you, and it's just part of your journey that you need to take charge of. And the trick is with mental health issues is that for you to benefit from the help, you must actually seek the help and want the help, and have the courage to sit with some of the pains or the traumas or the challenges you have in order to overcome. Sorry.
How do you then assist managers who might not be as fluent in the lexicon as you are, but they are in an environment where it's a pressured environment? So for them, ultimately, as much as they might want to accommodate, but the demands of the work require that even if you are suffering a particular disorder, you still deliver.
I'm of view that we really need to show or empower people in terms of how the mind works, because I'm of view that people don't actually understand how it actually works. 90% of the mind is the subconscious, and the 10% is the behaviors, the actions, the reactions that we see, or the things that people say. That's only 10%. So we really need to understand that 90% of those things below the surface, I always draw the mind like, an iceberg, and 90% of it is the things below the surface, and those things drive your reality. They determine how you experience life. So managers need to be aware that if people are not in charge or not aware, or they're projecting things from that space, that it's going to be something that they need to go through in order to be empowered themselves. So the managers also themselves, they need to understand that as much as their employees are projecting their own things from the subconscious, they themselves, by being triggered by someone who's not delivering, or by being irritable towards someone, that they're also projecting. So we, in the workplace, everyone is projecting on each other. So we really need to be aware that the subconscious is that powerful. But I'm of view that once people understand what actually happens, why we react the way we react to certain circumstances, then we become empowered, to move on from it, and also just do the work to become more self-aware, so that we can take charge, so that we're not just functioning from a place of pain or traumas, or a place of insecurity, whatever it is that we're struggling with in the subconscious, that we are empowered to understand what goes on there, so that we can carve our lives in this workplace.
So we've touched on a number of things in how we foster a culture of understanding, but we've also touched on how you foster a culture of support, how you foster a culture of empathy. Ultimately, what are some of the changes in workspaces that we can even begin to implement, some of the more tangible things that in the space that could bring some calm, that could bring some relief to people who are experiencing particular challenges?
We really need to make sure they have, they understand where to get the help that they need, firstly, but also to accept that they have a problem. Therefore, if I'm at the workplace and I've got this problem, and there's, for example, triggers or a lot of stress, or maybe sometimes you have been on medication and then it's not working for whatever reason, that I really need to be on top of my issue, in that I need to seek the help that is going to assist me to be productive. So we really need to take charge of our own journeys. Yes, workspaces must offer this holistic approach in helping or assisting, or an environment that accommodates, in terms of support, etc., or an understanding environment. But we ourselves, as the employees, we need to ensure that we are okay, we are aware, that we do the work to ensure that we help ourselves so that we can be productive. Of course, within mental health issues, even if you have been getting the treatment, relapse sometimes can occur, because stress is a part of life. So I think in that regard, that people need to be aware that where do I go when I'm not okay, but also that the workspaces, when people relapse, that they can be afforded the off days, so that they can seek the help that they need. And we also need to understand that sympathy is not the same as empathy. So it doesn't mean that we need to feel sorry for people who are going through this, but we need to be empathetic and put ourselves in their shoes, so that they can be assisted and empowered. And it doesn't mean that we need to treat them as if they are different and stigmatize them because of what they struggle with. I think it's more just understanding that the same way we treat someone with cancer or someone who has cholesterol, diabetes, in spite of them maybe being healthy, because that does happen, that this is what can happen as well, that some people are wired in this manner, that they are at risk for mental health challenges, therefore to afford them the opportunity to seek the help that they need. But of course, if there's denial, unfortunately, the relapse rate, but also the benefit from help can be limited. So boarding medically is also an option in severe cases, sadly. So, but we really need to understand that the way we treat, people who are physically ill, we should actually treat people who are challenged or struggling with mental health issues.
And finally, as I let you go, I mean, I know of companies where occupational health is a priority, even for visitors, where when you come to visit, you are required to arrive 30 minutes before the time because there's a safety video that you need to watch, and it's compulsory that you do that. Otherwise, you don't get clearance and get admitted into a particular space or a particular building. But when it comes, for example, to issues of mental health, there are resources sometimes that companies offer, information material online and whatever else. But it's, as you want to. It's there on the desk, and your colleagues can read it if they want to, if they don't. There's really nobody who's looking deliberately at whether or not you are consuming that kind of material.
Definitely, which is sad. As I started in the intro, that it's 2024 and we're still struggling with the stigma to get people to understand that the mind is actually very powerful, the same way that, it will carry the body actually when the body doesn't want to deliver. And yet we prioritize our physical appearance, how we look, and our physical health, and we don't take care of our minds. And yet the mind can carry you to, for example, finish a comrade race, finish the comrades, do extraordinary things and reach, great heights. But we don't prioritize the power that is in the mind, and also understanding that the mind is actually the hub of your reality, that actually whatever is happening in your mind will determine how you experience reality. That's why you get two people experiencing the same scenario, but one person is resilient and the other one is not. Yes, one might be predisposed to certain things, but nonetheless, it's just about how their mindset is in spite of the environment or their reality. And unfortunately, where you have people who have been through a lot of things, they carry those things even coming into the workplace, and it can be triggered in the workplace, or it can lead to mental health challenges. So that is the reality. So we really need to offer people the opportunity to journey and hopefully get the help that they need so they overcome certain things. Unfortunately, we can be on autopilot and survive like soldiers for a while, but at a certain point, it just stops working. It just, you cave in, and you really need to pay attention to the things of the subconscious mind so that you can overcome and move on and thrive. So we really need to do a lot of work out there as professionals to still, curb the stigma of seeking mental health intervention before it's too late, before it's a crisis, just as a check-in. So I'm of you, everyone should have someone like myself in their lives.
Dr. Mashego, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on this evening. Dr. Kitumetse Mashego, a clinical psychologist there.